So hello, thanks for joining us. My name is Christy McGackran and I'm a program manager here at McMaster Continuing Education. I'm here today with Stephanie Kirsta, co-founder of Home Digital, the world's first virtual meditation studio. And Home is also our partner in the Mindfulness in Modern Society program. For our time together today, I'll give a brief overview of the program, and then I'll hand it over to Stephanie to talk about the benefits of yoga, meditation, and mindfulness for stress reduction and regulation. McMaster's Mindfulness in Modern Society is the first fully online, non-credit program in the area of mindfulness and meditation offered through a post-secondary institution. Our mindfulness program is an excellent enhancement to an existing education, professional experience, or interest. Mindfulness has become a desirable skill set for many groups of professionals in healthcare, community and social services, education, corporate wellness programs, and of course, for our own personal wellness. It can also be used to enhance existing education in areas such as nursing, social work, teaching, HR, and counseling. The program is designed to provide a comprehensive overview of the history and origins of mindfulness, the foundational philosophies, and the proven scientific benefits of mindful practice. Each course will explore the modern and clinical applications of this practice, the current shift into living more mindfully, and how we can apply these learnings into our personal and professional lives. The courses can be taken in any order, but we do recommend that you start with Origins and Philosophies of Mindfulness if possible. We offer 2 certificates of completion. Successful completion of any 3 courses will earn you the Fundamentals of Mindfulness, and successful completion of any 5 will earn the Advanced Principles and Practice of Mindfulness. These certificates of completion are micro-credentials. They're issued in a shareable digital format that highlight the specific skills that you've learned. Or if you're not working towards a certificate of completion, you're welcome to mix and match whoever you wish, or just take 1 or 2 out of your own interest. And this year, we are pleased to offer 2 new courses: Anatomy and Physiology, the Mindful Body, and Mindful Instruction, Ethical Business Practices and Psychological Safety. We also have some exciting news to share. The completion of all 7 courses now meets the requirement for the meditation teacher designation through the Canadian Yoga Alliance. And you can visit their website for more details on this specific designation. Courses are delivered online through our learning management system. This is where you'll access all of the content and interact with your fellow learners and instructor. Each course runs over a 6-week period. The modules include elements such as experiential practice, group discussions, videos, resources, and practical applications to guide you in developing your mindful self. Several live sessions are held through Zoom, and although these sessions are highly recommended, they are recorded for those who are unable to attend. The full schedule for 2024-25 is on our website. Each term we offer a selection of courses and we stagger them throughout the term so that you can take courses one after another if you wish. You can also pick and choose courses here and there that suit your personal schedule. Our program is a unique partnership between Master Continuing Education and the world's first virtual meditation studio, Home Digital. You can find more information about Home Digital on their website, and they've created a truly unique immersive meditation app for their members to connect with. Home's founders, Stephanie Kirsta and Carolyn Plater, are mental health clinicians and educators. We've partnered together to bring you courses developed and taught by professionals in the field of mindfulness and meditation. And I'll hand it over now to Stephanie to tell us more about using yoga, meditation, and mindfulness for stress reduction and regulation.
Thank you, Christy. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today, we are going to be talking about, like Christy said, the benefits of yoga, meditation, and mindfulness for really stress reduction, but then also we're going to talk a little bit, actually quite a bit, about nervous system regulation. Nervous system regulation is something that lots of people are talking about right now. It's a topic that many of us are probably very aware of. Stress reduction is also something that, we are also quite aware of and, quite needing different stress reduction techniques. It seems like everyone is very stressed out right now. A little bit of background about me. I am a registered psychotherapist. So I work in mental health, and also that's kind of how I've gotten into the meditation and mindfulness field. But in my clinical practice, I can tell you that day in and day out, I am talking quite a bit about nervous system regulation, being dysregulated, and the impact of our physiology on our psychology and kind of how we're feeling with our mental health in general. So a little bit of science, little science talk, just so we understand what our nervous system is. And then I really want to get into some of the conversation around what we can do to bring our nervous system into balance. So if we think about our nervous system, it is our body's primary communication and control system. So it's what we need to respond to both internal and external stimuli. And there's two main branches. So our central nervous system, which I'm going to be talking quite a bit about, is our controls our brain and our spinal cord. And then the peripheral nervous system is our somatic and autonomous nervous system. Next slide, please. So if we think about our autonomous nervous system, it regulates involuntary bodily functions. So that's our heart rate, our digestion, our respiratory rate, and then that is further divided into our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. This is what we're going to be talking about because these nervous systems are really what, when we talk about nervous system regulation or dysregulation, that's really what we're talking about is sympathetic versus parasympathetic. And what's interesting is that these happen automatically. So we don't really know, kind of, we can't say like, oh, I'm in my sympathetic nervous system or I'm in my parasympathetic nervous system. Our bodies are, very, very, very sophisticated. And so certainly, these are happening kind of automatically. That's why I keep confusing autonomic and automatically. If you think about our sympathetic nervous system, this is our fight versus flight, that fight versus flight response. So really what it is when there's a threat to our survival. Let's say, from an evolutionary perspective, when we would sleep in caves, let's say, and a bear would come into the cave, our brain, our sympathetic nervous system would be activated. So what it does is it puts our body into fight or flight. Either, we're getting ready to fight off that bear or to run away from the bear. So what you'll notice when we're in fight or flight, and this is something that I see with anxiety and stress consistently in my practice. When somebody is in fight or flight, or when people are chronically stressed or chronically anxious, their bodies, pretty regularly or pretty chronically in this fight or flight response. They're so tapped into their sympathetic nervous system. So when we are in fight or flight, what tends to happen is that we tend to be really hyper alert, hyper aware, very jumpy, very aware of things around us, very sensitive to different stimuli, light and sound. And what tends to happen when we go into that fight or flight is that executive functioning that happens in our brain. We don't need that to fight off or to run away from a bear. And so our blood flow goes into our arms and legs. It gets us ready to, fight off that threat or run away from that threat. The other thing that tends to happen is our digestion. Our digestive system kind of pauses when we're in fight or flight, because again, those executive functions like, cognition, digestion, those aren't as important when we're running away or fighting for our survival. And so that sympathetic nervous system is really that awake and aware. Our parasympathetic nervous system is our rest and digest system. So this is, ideally when we're at home and we're relaxing or when we're going to bed at night, it's that nervous system that's kind of like relaxing everything, closing down. We're not hyper aware, we're not hyper alert, and our digestion tends to happen. A good example that I like to share with people when we think about parasympathetic response or our parasympathetic nervous system is if you've ever had a massage. So if you've ever gone somewhere and had a massage, and during the massage, your stomach starts to growl. And then you're like, oh my gosh, how come my stomach's growling? I can't believe this. I'm embarrassed, whatever it may be. That is a cue that you're in parasympathetic response, because when we're relaxing, that's when those digestive juices are flowing. That's when the GI, tends to be happening. Another tip that I always like to share with people is that oftentimes when we look at people who are chronically stressed or chronically anxious, there's a lot of people talking about, there's a lot of literature right now looking at the gut and the brain and gut health connected with brain health. And I would say, and if we look at the literature out there, so much when people are chronically stressed, when people are chronically anxious, I would say like clinically, 95% of people who come and see me for anxiety have stomach issues. So, they have some GI upset, maybe they have IBS, because there's such an interconnection between our brain and our gut. And we do know that. We could talk for hours about that. But more importantly, and kind of what's interesting is thinking about that fight or flight. If we're consistently in fight or flight, our digestion system is not working as well as it should be. And so that's also a sign that we're dysregulated, is if our nervous or if our digestion tends to be off because it's not flowing as regularly or as effectively as it could be. When we talk about regulation within the nervous systems is when there's a balance between the activation of the sympathetic nervous system and activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. And so what that means is if I'm going to work and I'm, going through my day and I'm kind of on it and I'm, working, and maybe there's times where I have to be a little bit more alert, like let's say my commute to work, but, I take a lunch break and I'm able to relax and I'm able to kind of, turn my brain off for a little bit and then, get home and then I can rest and I'm feeling good. There's that balance between, being active and alert, which we should be, and then being relaxed and kind of, not as alert as we should be as well. Dysregulation happens when the systems don't work efficiently in responses to our experiences. And so what that means is if I'm alert and aware, with that sympathetic nervous system, so I'm alert and aware through my day, but instead of being alert and aware, I'm now constantly tapping into that fight or flight. Every email I get from my boss, every phone call I get, my brain is just super, super stressed. My brain is just super activated. And then when I get home, I'm unable to turn that off. Maybe I'm ruminating about my day. Maybe I'm really worried about my day. Maybe I'm working till 2 o'clock in the morning. What you're seeing is that sympathetic nervous system and that particularly that fight or flight is really, really activated, and that parasympathetic is not really. So then you'll see that there's not that balance between it. I'm hoping that makes sense. Let me know if there's any questions. Just quickly, I'm going to go over a little bit about the stress response as well. And then I promise this is the last of the sciencey stuff we'll talk about. We think about our stress response. With stress, when there's something that is, a stressor for us, when there's something that maybe is a threat for us, our brain, I'm going to give you a really good, kind of a really quick little summary of this, but our brain, signals through our pituitary glands to our adrenals that, to pump out cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol is stress hormone. Adrenaline is that hormone that gets us moving. That goes into our bloodstream. And what tends to happen are all of these things on the slide. So like I said before, digestion slows down, tunnel vision, accelerated heart rate, fast breathing, increased sweating, increased blood pressure. And then our liver converts glycogen into glucose. And all of those things, if we think about the stress response, stress is productive. Stress is a normal biological function. Stress is designed to keep us alive. As humans, we need to be aware to identify what a threat is. As humans, we need to be aware to identify, I need to maybe run away from that threat or fight off that threat. So we do need to have stress in our life. It's not realistic to think we're not going to have stress in our life, or I need to have a completely stress-free life. Stress is actually, it's a normal biological function. It's a normal thing that we all experience. There's also benefits to stress, because stress can be motivating in certain amounts. If you look at the Yerkes-Dodson law, which is like, if you imagine like an upside down U, stress, there's a peak level of stress and performance. And then if stress gets to be too much, it kind of pummels down. It's quite low. So there is this kind of intersection of stress can be motivating and it can increase our performance, but too much stress or not enough stress doesn't have that effect and can actually have opposite effects. So we can't imagine, we can't, the goal is not to not have stress. The goal is to be able to manage our stress. And then more so, like I talked about before, is to be able to efficiently identify or effectively identify what are those things that are kind of worthy of our stress or worthy of fight or flight. What tends to happen in this day and age is because we're so chronically stressed, because we're so quick to, tap into fight or flight, any email from the boss, any phone call, any, someone cutting off in traffic, we tend to, we tend to bust out that stress response quite quickly. We tap into that fight or flight quite quickly. So, how do we know? How do we know our nervous system is dysregulated? How do we know that maybe we are, not in balance between our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous systems? So the kind of big cues that we have out there is one is that we're constantly feeling like we're on edge and overwhelmed. So you're constantly feeling, I have many clients who have said to me before, they kind of feel like they're like reverberating inside, or they're like vibrating inside because they feel like they're just so overstimulated, so hyperstimulated that they constantly feel that, they're super jumpy and they're super kind of feeling like they can't even relax. Sometimes they have trouble catching their breath. They have trouble not being able to focus because they're so on edge and so overwhelmed. Another one is short fuse. So people who tend to be a little bit snappier, maybe we find that we're really irritable or really reactive to things. So something that maybe, again, wouldn't make us that angry or frustrated in the short term tends to make us very, very reactive. An example I like to give of this is, if you're really stressed out, I always say, like, when we're really stressed out and there's so many things that are happening and there's so many things that are going on. I remember once I was really anxious. I was really stressed out about something. And then, I was kind of like going through my day, I was on autopilot. But then what happened was I broke a glass. Like, I had a glass fall out of the cupboard. I broke a glass. And that was kind of that saying, the straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. That was the thing that kind of put me over the edge. And then, super angry, super frustrated. I saw in the chat, tearful, like not happy at all. So sometimes you find that, like, something that maybe would be not so upsetting might be overwhelming, upsetting. I see that with generalized anxiety as well, or people who are very chronically stressed as well. An example that I like to give is, if you think about a string that's pulled really, 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 really tight, anything that we put on that string will break it, right? Versus if we have like more of a slack string, it tends to not be as easy to break. And that highlights the short fuse that we have. If we're so, pulled so tight, pulled in so many directions, that our string is, maybe one step away from breaking, and that's snapping or being irritable or reactive or yelling at people. Chronic pain and illness can come from long-term dysregulation, long-term chronic stress. But I also find decreases in immunity. So people who tend to get lots of colds, lots of flus, kind of sniffles, sore throats all the time, you find that stress can have a really negative impact on our overall immunity. Overly stimulated, so feeling really stimulated by, bright lights, loud noises, maybe things that didn't really overstimulate us before are really impacting that. A big one that I see is sleep impacts and fatigue. So one side, you might have people who have insomnia, so they have trouble falling asleep or trouble staying asleep. The other thing is that sometimes they can sleep and sleep and sleep and sleep, but never feel rested. So it doesn't matter how much they sleep, they're not feeling rested. Difficulty paying attention is another really big one that we see. And then changes in appetite. So sometimes changes to be hungrier or not hungry at all. And that also has to do with the digestion that's being impacted. So what do? How do we regulate our nervous system? So like I said before, the physiological response is involuntary. It's automatic. It happens without us knowing about it. But even just knowing what we know now, we can bring awareness to those processes that are happening in our body, and we can actively work to bring ourselves back into balance. So a reason why we're all here and the topic that we're talking about today is mindfulness meditation. So mindfulness meditation, seated kind of formal meditation, and breath work. So kind of the umbrella of mindfulness and meditation and yoga are all things that there's a lot of literature for the impact and how it can bring us back into balance. So a little bit of just kind of studies and literature on that. If we look at mindfulness influences the stress pathways in our brain, and it has been shown to change brain structures and activity in regions associated with attention and emotional regulation. We do know that practicing meditation can lessen the inflammatory response in people exposed to psychological stressors. We see that there's really good benefit for that in long-term meditation. And we do know the neuroscience of meditation, and we're going to get into this in 102. If anyone takes MND 102, you're going to learn a lot about this in the neuroscience class. But meditation practices, they slow down activity in our amygdala. Our amygdala is that part of our brain that is, really highly linked to stress and anxiety response. And so I'll always say, if you ever see me clinically, I always say like that little amygdala part of our brain is just flashing danger, danger, danger. And that's what's really stressing us out. That's what's really making us anxious. So meditation and mindfulness can help slow down an overactive amygdala, and it can help increase the connections between the amygdala and our prefrontal cortex. What that means is that both of those parts of the brain help us to be less reactive to stressors and help us to recover better from stress when we experience it. So a little bit about the different forms of meditation and mindfulness and yoga. So yoga, certainly yoga is mindfulness paired with movement. Mindfulness in general is any practice that we do where we're purposefully paying attention. So mindfulness could be mindful eating, where you have your meal in silence and you really tap into all the senses, when we eat our meal. What does our meal look like? What does it smell like? What are we tasting? What are we hearing? Just doing that activity. I love to mindful coffee drink. So in the morning, I'll have my coffee and I'll have a couple moments to myself, and I'm feeling the temperature of the mug, and I'm looking at the color, and I'm smelling it, and I'm watching the steam come up. You can mindfully wash dishes. So mindful coloring, mindful journaling. So any type of contemplative practice, any type of practice where we're purposefully paying attention falls under the umbrella of mindfulness. Meditation is, that seated kind of formal, when you identify meditation, or if you think about meditation, it's that seated practice, but it's essentially a practice of mindfulness. Meditation can be done seated, it can be done lying down. But essentially, and a lot of people like guided ones. I find guided can be, it's what I always say, guided is a great, start into meditation, but truthfully, I still prefer guided meditations, and I've been doing this for 15 years. So, but some people will just have silence. And a lot of people think with meditation, well, I can't meditate. I have too many thoughts in my brain. That's kind of the point. Like, the point of meditation is not to rid your mind of thoughts, to rid your brain of thoughts. It's impossible to have no thoughts. The purpose of meditation, the practice of meditation, is to bring our present moment, bring our brain, bring our attention back to the present moment. When our brain starts to wander, bringing it back to the present moment. And the other thing is to remember that when we have these thoughts, it's a really great practice in emotional balance and reactivity. So when we do have these thoughts, if we do have these thoughts that are maybe a little bit more stressful or more a little bit anxiety provoking, it's being able to practice bringing our thoughts back to the present moment and not having that emotional regulation, that emotional reaction to those thoughts. So meditation, a lot of people think I have to rid my mind of brains. No, I have to rid my mind of thoughts, not rid your mind of brains, please. But a lot of people think that, but it's actually not the case. It's more the practice of when our mind wanders, noticing it and bringing it back to the present moment. There's lots of different meditations that are out there. There's, like I said, there's guided ones, there's body scans where you go through your body and note different parts. There's visualization meditations. There are breathwork practices, what we're going to be talking about. There are mantra practices. So lots of different amazing meditation styles and practices. Creative or mindful play. So creative or mindful play, I'll get to breathwork in a second. Creative or mindful play is, anything. I've been taking pottery classes and I find that they're a phenomenal mindful experience, because what I'm doing is I'm really just paying attention to what I'm doing, because if I don't, I'm going to lose everything that I do. But mindful coloring or building of different things. So we can bring play into mindfulness into play as well. And then yoga is, again, moving through different poses. And it's more of kind of the physical expression of mindfulness. Breathwork is another tool that works really, really well to regulate our nervous system. So we're going to practice a little bit of this when we finish talking about what we're talking about. But breath work, what it does is it signals to our brain. So our brain and our body are so interconnected, right? So if our brain says, hey, this is something, email from my boss, danger, danger, we need to freak out about this. Breath work, what it does is it has our body say to our brain, hey, no, there's no stress here. We're not going into fight or flight. There isn't a threat here. So breath work can work really, really well to kind of circumvent that automatic anxious response, that automatic kind of fight or flight physiological response that can come up when we're really highly stressed or really highly anxious. 4 that I really love are slow breathing. So slow breathing is breathing in through your nose for a count of 4, holding for 7 seconds, and exhaling slowly through your mouth for 9 seconds. And repeating that, I always say to clients, like, set a timer for about 5 minutes and repeat that. It's interesting because the breath retention and the exhalation is so much longer. And a lot of people think, when we say to people, just breathe, take a deep breath, it's actually the benefits with breath work are on the retention and the exhalation. And so the slow breathing technique is really helpful because it helps us to really focus on those sections. And those are really what signals to our brain and our amygdala, no threat here, we're okay. Box breathing is another really easy one to remember and to do. And it's the 4, 4, 4, 4. So I imagine like a box. So breathing in for 4, holding for 4, out for 4, and hold for 4. So I like to imagine kind of a box. Sometimes I'll draw it on my hand. Sometimes I'll also even say to clients to use your hand and trace your hand as a good example, because it, again, brings the attention into something that we're doing. So trace the thumb, in for 4, top, hold for 4, down, hold for 4, down, out for 4, and then in that little inside section, hold for 4, and then do the rest of the hands. So I say, like, do your hand, maybe do it backward, like, so you're doing it 10 times. And that's a really great way to, again, tap into that parasympathetic nervous system. The physiological sigh is another really great one. And that's 2 sharp inhales and 1 long elevated exhale. So breathe like 2 breaths in and then 1 long one out, and then repeating that. And then alternate nostril breathing is just breathing in through one nostril and then breathing out through the other nostril, breathing in through that nostril and breathing out from that nostril. So it's a yogic breath, but essentially you're using different nostrils. Again, focus and attention, but also there are breath pathways in our nose, our connected with different parts of our brain as well. So you're stimulating either of those as well. Next slide, please. Okay. I talked about yoga. Exercise is also another really great one to regulate our nervous system. So exercise, any type of exercise. We know if we think about cortisol and adrenaline, so if you go back to that image that we had about the stress response, our adrenals are, that sit on top of our kidneys, pumping out adrenaline and cortisol that's going through our body. We need to flush that out. So if we are having days where, cortisol and adrenaline is pumping through the bloodstream, exercise is a really good way to burn off that cortisol and that adrenaline. And so with exercise, cardiovascular activity is really effective in burning off that cortisol and that adrenaline, and it doesn't need to be a lot. So I would say when we look at the studies that look at the benefits of exercise for our mental health, really most of the studies look at walking, preferably outside, because outside does have some additional benefits in stress reduction, but 20 to 30 minutes most days. And you want to be able to still talk. So if you're walking with someone, let's say, you want to be able to talk, but not sing. So it's brisk enough that you can still talk, but, brisk enough that you're not able to kind of carry a tune. So it's a little bit breathy, but it's actually not like a full run or a full speed walk. So it's really quite accessible. And we do find that cardiovascular activity tends to work. When someone goes into a panic attack, and I'm getting a little bit kind of off topic, but it's an interesting one. If someone's in a panic attack or an anxiety attack, which is, kind of really high, anxiety, really high panic, what we generally find can be really helpful is short and fast physical activity. So jumping jacks, or, doing as many push-ups as you can and as hard as fast as you can in like 2 minutes. Because what that does is a really quick way to burn off adrenaline and cortisol that's pumping through our body. So yoga and exercise are two fantastic ones for regulating of our nervous system. Weighted blankets and also weighted eye pillows tend to also be very helpful for regulating our nervous system, especially after in the evening in preparation for bedtime. How weighted blankets work is they are deep touch pressure therapy. And essentially what it does, it's pressure points on our body. So essentially it's that, that feeling on our body, that weight on our body is saying to our body, there's no threat here. Another one that works really well as weighted blankets, kind of similar but different, is legs up the wall pose. So that's a yoga pose, but essentially what you would do is lie down and put your legs against a headboard, put your legs up against a wall. Essentially, you just want your legs above your heart, your feet above your heart. So if you just want to put enough pillows underneath your feet so that your feet are above your heart, you're getting the benefit from it. And spending, 10 to 15 minutes in that position. Also, it's that physiological kind of effect, is that it's our body telling our brain, there's no threat here. There's no stress here. You don't need to be in fight or flight. So it's a way, I always say to my clients, it's a way for your body to trick your brain into learning kind of what needs to be worrisome or stressful and what doesn't. Laughing, singing, or humming can also help tone the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a nerve, again, there's a lot of literature coming out about vagal nerve toning and our vagus nerve, but our vagus nerve is connected with the stress response as well. So anytime we are laughing or singing or humming, it is stimulating and toning our vagus nerve. So you'll find oftentimes with different meditation, mindful practices, also yoga, that there is that element of vibration in our throat. And, it's what it does is it helps to stimulate that vagus nerve. So it has an extra kind of relaxing effect. My favorite trick of all is a sour candy. And so I have all of my clients use sour candies. And why I love sour candy so much is, if we are stressed out, or if we are feeling that we are, some of those symptoms, hyper alert, hyper aware, hypersensitive, Popping a sour candy in our mouth, what it does is, number one, it's sour, so it shocks our attention into the present moment, what we're doing. The second thing is, because candies are sour, it stimulates the salivary glands to start producing saliva. Well, the production of saliva stimulates our digestive response. So our body, it helps to put our body into that parasympathetic because we're now tapping into that digestive system. So I love a sour candy for that. I don't love sour candies actually, but I love them for that. Cold showers or face plunges as well can be really helpful. So, filling up a bowl with water and ice, putting our face in it, repeating that for a few times. Again, shocks our brain into the present moment, into what we're doing right now. So it helps to stop that spiral that's kind of going on in our brain. Same thing with cold showers. And then lastly is prioritizing sleep. And again, I could talk for hours about sleep, but sleep is one of those things that we're not getting good enough sleep, and we're not generally sleeping enough. Like I said, I could talk for hours, but my 4 tips that I really, really like are magnesium glycinate, which is a mineral. A lot of us are deficient in magnesium. I really like the foot spray. So you can just buy a magnesium foot spray, spray it on your feet before bed. We are all pretty much deficient in magnesium. And so I do like that because, again, it's what we need to be able to produce melatonin to be able to fall into a good sleep. Chamomile tea also before bed. The practice of having a hot tea before bed is really, it's a ritual that cues our brain that it's time to fall asleep. And chamomile does have evaluative properties to be able to be relaxing. Sleeping in a cold, dark bedroom, it's very chilly. If you look at the literature for best practices for the temperature for a bedroom, it's 17 to 19 degrees Celsius. So it's chilly. I've gone down to 19.5 and it's still a tough one. So I can't imagine going down to 17. But if you think about it as from an evolutionary perspective, and really our nervous system is, quite archaic. We used to sleep in caves. So we used to sleep in these really cold, dark areas. And so being able to sleep in something that is very, very cold and very devoid of light and very dark mimics that. And so it is very familiar for our nervous system. And then progressive muscle relaxations are also really great. They're a medical directive for the treatment of insomnia, actually. And before bed, we're having someone practice this progressive muscle relaxation. So essentially what you do is lying down in bed, you're actively tensing and releasing different parts of your body. So you would, tense up your feet for 5 seconds and then release, and then tense up your calves, tight, 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 and then release them. And then your thighs, moving all the way up into and including your face, and then all the way back down. You can YouTube videos on that. There's lots of different audios, but I really love progressive muscle relaxation before bed. But then also, if you do wake up in the night and you do have trouble falling back asleep, the progressive muscle relaxation is also a really good one for that. And then I also just wanted to share with everyone. So the home app it's a virtual reality app. So we use it on kind of the MetaQuest or the Apple, but we've also just launched it for iOS and Android. So in the Google Play Store. And so we do have a digital kind of mobile app for your phone that you can use. And so there's lots of different ones. There's lots of different meditations, mindfulness practices, breathwork trainers. There's a mental health toolbox. I have done quite a few guided meditations on the app as well. And so you're welcome to try it out for a month for free. The promo code is right there, free month. And then there's a little bit of guidelines on how to redeem it. You do have to put your credit card in to redeem the code as it says there, but then you can unsubscribe right after. But I'd love for you to try it out, try out the different practices. We have a progressive muscle relaxation. I saw in Yoga Nidra in the chat, we have lots of great Yoga Nidra. guided meditations and practices. And so I'd love for you to try it out and try adding in the different meditation and mindfulness practices to help bring our nervous system back into balance. I hope that some of these tips were helpful for you. I hope that some of you will join the new meditation program, and not the new meditation program, but the mindfulness program at MAC. And I hope that if you don't have a practice, or maybe you want to build a bigger practice, that this has inspired you to do so.
I would like to thank everybody so much, and this has been a wonderful experience. And Stephanie, your presentation was just fantastic, and thank you so much. I think we would all agree that we learned a lot about ourselves and why things happen that we maybe wondered, but why it's like that. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. If you have any other questions, you can see the email is on the slide there. Go to our website, please. There's lots of good information on there as well, and I'm happy to help you out further. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.